Hi.
Are we on yet?
Are we on? Are we on? Hi, guys.
Hello.
I'm Farah. I'm Nicole. And this is The Scoop. Today, we are going to talk about equitable access and Sonnenberg and what is different about Sonnenberg Consultants and other ABA companies. So we'll just jump right in and start right away. So should we start with what's different or equitable access? What would you like to start with?
We can start with what's different.
Okay. All right. So what the point of this video is to just go over the structure of Sonnenberg and why we structured Sonnenberg the way that we did and what makes it different. But the why is what I think I'm really interested in to explain that. So basically it was structured because we wanted to have full-time schedules and we wanted to be day hours because when 8 years ago we had decided that 80% of the hours or so was after school or weekends. Or we had split shifts. So we'd have something like a morning shift and then they'd go all day or 3 or 4 hours. And then we'd have a night shift, or we would have Monday through Thursday or Friday, what was common, 4 to 7 or something like that. And then weekend shifts, throughout. Well, that's not, sustainable if you want, first of all, full-time employee. And honestly, I was doing those shifts and it's just not really something that you want to do if you're trying to have a family or if you just want, you have school, social life, all those kind of things. So we wanted to create a block schedule is where it kind of first started. And we wanted to bring everything to the clinic. So we've been in this clinic about 8 years. This is Pleasant Prairie. And it was really important for us to structure that so people could come, they could stay in one location, they could finish, and then they could go home. And that's what we've achieved, essentially. It's been very different with that structure. We also, you can jump in whenever if I'm missing something, but we also wanted to have more quality control in one environment and then generalize and bring parents in or go to families for, working with the families and things like that. But we had more control over the environment and more consistency with that. So the business plan versus the staff and the parent, quality all aligned that way, because families too, if you were to go in home, you have to have somebody in the home that's 18 years or older. I think we did a couple of variances that were 16 or 17 or 18-year-olds at times. But in general, if you're doing it through the state, you're supposed to be 18. Somebody's supposed to be in the home. And so that really is not equitable access at all, that you only have one income family, so to speak, or you had to hire somebody else to do that. So that was another kind of goal of ours, is to be able to have families come in, drop off, go to work, and then come back. So that's what the model was also based off of. So staff could come here, families could come here from beginning to end. They could be full-time. We could offer training was better because you got full-time people that were here every day. We have total access to supervisors, leads, the resources were in home. I mean, I can speak from when I was in home back in the day, and, it would go months without seeing my supervisor. And back then we didn't have BCBAs, but, I didn't see any of my seniors or I never saw the leads, like maybe once or twice a year. I think it was every 6 months, I think. So very different, where they have access to supervisors continually and multiple. So if we needed to brainstorm or we needed to ask for help or something like that, we could bring somebody else in easily. Social skills, groups, all different ages. If somebody calls in, the hope is that we're staffed enough that we can have somebody else take that place and work with that child. And also there get more experience across, ages or just kids, all different things, adults, versus younger kids, middle, school readiness, those kind of things. I'm kind of jumping all over. So what am I missing?
It was the same for me, like starting in the field. I would have an in-home client. in Great Lakes, and then I would travel about like an hour with traffic, like an hour and 20 to the clinic. And then once I got to the clinic, like due to that midday kind of travel time, I would only get whatever hours I was able to have in the clinic, which was like maybe 2-ish. And then some days I would go right home. Other days I would go backwards to around the same area that I was already in to have a night client, same thing, from like 4 to like 7-ish. And then I would travel like 30 minutes home. So there was a lot of like, in order to get your hours, a lot of like travel pieces that didn't, at the end of the day, like didn't really equal the amount of hours I was outside of my home.
Oh, that's a really good point. Is what you're actually spending in your car, going in home, going from house to house, or even clinic to house, or whatever it is that you're doing, or whatever you're assigned. I know different companies do different things, but that also was, I mean, you're working 60, 70 hours if you're trying to get a full-time job. And I can't remember what the research was, Liz, that you had found, but wasn't it like 40%? Like 40% up to 40% cancel when you're, cancel shifts, period. Is that in home or is that just in general?
I think it was in home.
In home? In home. And so that was what we were also trying to avoid. I mean, there's times that you would show up at the house and be calling them outside, sitting there waiting for them to answer the door. And then you have to sit there and wait. And then now you have a 3 or 4 hour gap. So then you're sitting. I mean, it was just very difficult to make a living and really get the supervision that you needed, the kids getting that consistency. It's not unheard of that we have staff come to us and they're like, I am a full-time person. I've had 10, 15 hours. And I'm like, how is that even possible? Because we've been doing this so long. I mean, we want to guarantee the hours. We want them to come in and we want to cross train them. We want to give them more supervision. We want to give them more experience. That helps them. That helps the client. It helps everybody. It helps the families. So that was how we came about our model. It definitely wasn't unheard of for me. I worked out of Illinois too for about, I still am, but for a really long time where it was, at one point I was 3 hours one way that I was going if I went during rush hour and literally for a 3 hour shift. And then so I was literally in my car 5 to 6 hours. I mean, that's ridiculous. You just can't sustain that. So yeah, I think that traveling is a big deal. I'm trying to think what else we had on here.
Yeah. I mean, even at a clinic that I worked at, we had clients that we would see at like what they call lockout. So they were in a hospital type setting. And that we would travel about 3.5 hours to like Southern Illinois and back. So although it was a cool experience, that travel is challenging for sure.
Yes, that's
and fair. You don't necessarily get to, at least at that organization, like get to choose like what clients you got. You were assigned those clients, and that's what you did.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. So, if we have we place somebody with a client and it's just not a good fit. So, for example, or there's a better fit, or we see something, an area that might better suit the child or the client or the staff, it's easier to switch. It's easier to say, you know what, let's try you over here. This is a better match for you, or this supervisor's a better supervisor for what we need to do, or what have you. So that's a good point too. You can't really do that in home so quickly. It takes a lot more planning because the scheduling in ABA is always the beast. Always.
I don't think that many organizations you can, period, whether you're like clinic or in home. I don't know many organizations that will like allow you to kind of like pick and choose your caseload. Usually like a child comes into intake or an individual does the intake, and then you're just assigned that kid. Like, okay, on Tuesday, you got to go see so-and-so. So sometimes you don't necessarily know.
That's true.
Or
I wasn't.
Or it's not like assigned to you based on like your expertise or.
Yeah, that's
whatever.
true. Yeah. That's true. I mean, we obviously want people to have a variety of experience, and we want to push people and train so we can, anyone can take whatever needs to, be taken as far as caseload. But I also want to make sure that the clients, and we want to make sure the clients get what they need, and that's really important. So sometimes people are just better off in a certain area. So, and then we work our way to, wherever we want them to be, or we have them work one-on-one for a while to go through the programming and things like that. What am I trying to say? Moving up the ladder, with opportunities, job opportunities is much higher than the national average too. Do you remember, Liz, what that was?
Sorry, what?
The chain of like moving up in opportunities for growth within the company. What was our national average that was higher? Do you remember? Around?
I don't recall, but I know ours was 3 times.
It was 3 times. Well, we know, so when you go through an accreditation, which is what we go through every 2 years, is you go through kind of a gamut of what everybody else is doing, whether that is pay, whether that's what the feedback is from family, staff, everything you can think of. So one of the things that they talk about is just opportunity for growth. And we were 2 to 3 times more than other companies. There was a percentage, I just can't remember what it was. So that was cool because when I really think about it, we're constantly setting goals with, okay, so where you're here, is there something like where you want to be in a year, where you want to be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years? And it's okay that it changes. It could change. That's okay too. And that really, I think, sets us apart a lot because it's a lot more work because you have to really be checking in all the time. You've got to be really having, great relationship with your staff and kind of divvying that out. So we've changed softwares to do that. We're constantly talking about that, I would say, because that changes a lot too, even within supervisors. So we have somebody that's like, this is what I want to do. And then they start it and they're like, this isn't what I thought it was, or now I saw this, or I dabbled in this, and this is really exciting, So we're always just really touching base because just like in an ABA, if you're motivated and you want to do something, you're more apt to be successful. So we want our staff to be successful with that. Do you have anything to say about that? Because I think that's a really big difference with us.
It's a really big difference. I guess typical models are to have a BCBA and to have RBTs. And that's really all that you see in organizations. Now, of course, you have like some of your like upper management teams, right? Like you still see like clinical directors, or you see like regional directors or things of that nature. But as far as like anything other than RBT or BCBA is just not a thing. And it's not a thing because organizations, especially like big box organizations, really focus on like their income coming in. And that's really how you make it, is by the BCBAs and by the RBTs. You don't make it by giving people all their hours and by creating positions for them and creating like built-in supports, because all of those are administrative roles within an organization.
That's a really good point. That is a big cost. It does come at, as far as guaranteeing hours for techs or for whomever, it is a cost. We've talked to our mentor, we've talked to like our mentor and that works with us with all of the Equitable Access we're going to talk about in a little bit. So she helps to head some of that stuff. And one of our first questions. How do you do that? She's a BCBA. She's been involved with all of these different things and other organizations. Like, how do you do that? I'm like, well, it comes at a cost. It definitely comes at a cost. We have to make sure that, that we're setting this up so it means something. First of all, it's not just I'm just going to give you these hours. So do whatever you want. We want to make you better staff. We want to cover these other kids. So when staff is sick or on vacation, that we can place these staff on these other kids, and it's still the services mean something. It's not just a place filler. We want them to mean something. We want, and the whole hope of all of that too is that you bring down turnover and you increase your retention rate and those kind of things. That's the hope, is that they get more. You get more quality supervisors because you're training constantly.
I think that's the biggest thing, actually, because with all these additional layers that we have as an organization and that like additional supervision piece, it also adds that growth for that individual, because oftentimes, like I could go to school for a couple years, be a BCBA and never work in the field at all and just go start at a company.
That's very true.
And so as we have just a lot of training opportunities, and because we are a 3-tiered model and we have this like built-in like additional supervision piece, those individuals also are learning as they grow. And so when they become a BCBA, it's not such a big like hurdle. Like they kind of already know what they're doing. They have those like foundational skills.
That's a very good point for sure. Because I think the biggest jump truly is when you're a tech or an RBT, and then all of a sudden you're a senior and you're supervising people.
Yeah.
So like it's always the supervision. I feel like the kids and the programming comes because you've seen so much, you've worked. I mean, if you're a tech with us, you've seen dozens and dozens of kids. When I was a tech in home, I had worked with, I think 3 or 4.
Yeah.
That's crazy because we start them off at 3 or 4, you know what I mean? So, or more depending on the individual, but that's kind of like what our model, it's we're shifting all the time to see what's best. But, that's a really good point, because I remember what it was like to be a tech. I mean, it was called something different back then, and then going, and now I'm responsible for my peers too. Like that's the other thing. Like, oh, I was friends with that person. Now you want me to supervise them, and this is weird, So we're trying to be more proactive about those pieces and just kind of put in those. Proactive really is what we're always trying to do. Is like, this is what's coming. This is how it may feel. Do you want to switch clinics? Do you want to switch tracks? Do you want to switch, whatever, because we want them to be successful. But ultimately, you're right. The investment is in each individual because they have that training, and it's not such a huge jump, even though it obviously always is more learning and things like that. But that's also why we just added the mentor program too back in. We had it a few years ago. I think it was 2 years ago that we had. It's not as structured hopefully that we're going to be turning this into, or that it's becoming, but that also puts another layer, because they're training and supervising and mentoring the new people that are coming in, and maybe even some that have been here for a little while if they need it. That's something it can be, but the purpose is that new people come in, that a peer-to-peer relationship, and even what the data tells you is that they're more apt to ask questions and reach out and just feel more comfortable because it's their peer. And so we're having kind of things like that occur. And I think that I'm really excited about that too, because that will be another step, because every single person that is in that position wants to keep improving themselves and grow. And most of them want to be seniors or BCBAs. So it's just another, so it's not such a huge gap, when they do become that. So I think that's helpful too.
Yeah.
So yeah, what else? Anything else with that?
I mean, I think that what makes us really unique, or what draws people to us, is that we really do focus on the individual, just like we do our clients, we do with our staff. So we're looking at, you mentioned before, like what motivates them, what areas do they want to grow in, and how they get there, and making this as clear as we can. We do like, again, kind of change things or modify things as we go, but this clear path to how do I get from point A to point B if this is like what I want to do, and providing those opportunities. I mean, I think that we've created job roles for individuals at times, and I don't know of any other organization, even outside of the ABA field, that would make a position based on that person's like not just wants and needs, but strengths and what they value, and creating that for them.
That's a good point too. And I think what we've learned, or I know what we've learned in the last 3 years too, is exactly what you just touched on, is those values. And that brings up the equitable access too, is, one of the things is I've interviewed, I'm trying to think, maybe 5 different individuals that either have come from other ABA companies or have left and then come back. And the message is continually the same, is that people just don't understand, that this field was not made to be a full-time position, as it was an entry level, 6 to 12 hours in the beginning of this field when I started 20 some years ago, is that it was meant to be for college students, 6 to 12 hours. That's it. Think about how much less training and opportunities you get with that. That's 2 shifts.
Yeah.
And that's what it was, 2 shifts. There was a 10-hour training, and it was half of that was orientation. So you got to basically overlap, observe for a few hours, and then you did it for a few hours and you were done.
Mm-hmm.
That was it.
I got no training. I was like, here's this kid, here's their programs.
Wow.
You know verbal behavior, right? Yeah, I do. Okay.
Wow.
But then I've been at other organizations where it's so rigid that it's just kind of ridiculous. Like, you have to ask someone if you can convert your timesheet, or ask someone to like put in a program for you, or like little tiny like pieces of our job. You had to like ask someone to do that and then wait a week for them to like get to it.
Wow.
So it's just interesting.
It is
the type of experiences that everyone has kind of had out there and what that looks like.
And I think our Sonnenberg is always trying to find that balance of like, having the quality, having we've got to make sure we're hitting what we need to hit as far as, ABA and just quality control. And then also, but we want you to fly. We want you to do, this child, how to move, how to train, that kind of stuff. So it's really, I feel, is a balance for sure. And I think that's what I love about us, is that we're constantly trying to reevaluate and say, what is it that we need? What don't we need? Who do we need? How do we shift now? Oh, this would be great. So I think that's definitely different too, because it's not easy to do that. It'd be much easier I would be bored off my mind if we didn't ever have anything. Like, it's another day, let's go out, can you imagine? It's like,
there's a lot that like live in this box, and the box is some are like this big and some are like this big. But don't you dare go outside the box, right? Don't you dare go off the script or have a new idea. A lot of new ideas maybe wouldn't be considered. I think that we consider a lot of different like feedback pieces or suggestions.
In fact, I think to piggyback that is we have to tell ourselves that we already did all some things, so that we have a great plan and remind each other, we already have an answer to that. Oh, that's right. Because we love like thinking of like what it could be, or, what's needed, and all of our needs are sometimes different, and what we're like, what, motivates us. So we have to just remind ourselves sometimes of that too, for sure. I mean, that's something that we do, but yeah, I mean, I think the biggest things are the stuff that we already went over in the beginning, but like when I look at all the people that I interviewed, I mean, it's really, all of them, surprisingly to me, I don't know why I'm surprised by this, but all of them, like all 5 said, you guys treat the kids like they're, and adults, whoever, clients, like they're human beings. They're not, like, you value that they are real people and that they have feelings, and that, yes, we do it within the structure, but go back to like they're kids though, or they're, adults that have opinions and they should have a say, and whatever, all the different things that I think sometimes, ABA gets a bad rap for, and so all of these people that had left or come back or had been at different places had said that it's very different. And I don't know why that surprised me so much. I guess it's because that's just, I don't know, it's just the way that it is. And that brought in the values, and that they really valued that we really tried to, or we are trying and continually trying to implement that across the board with staff, with parents, with us, and that we really are constantly working on it. And that's a lot of work too, but I mean, that's the culture that you try to create, and we really try to uphold that. So like the Equitable Access is something that we've changed a few times, we've modified, and as far as what we call it, because we didn't want it to be everybody's the same.
Yeah.
'Cause
We didn't want anything that related to the word equal, right? Because it's no human being is the same, right? Think about how we work with our clients. Everyone is met where they're at. Each client is met where they're at. Our staff is met where they're at, right? So that's not equal. That's not the same for every single person. It's just not, and it never will be. When you see things that are the same for every person, that's what I talk about the box for, right?
Yeah.
You're living in the box. Like this is all that you follow. This is all that you have. And that's it. There's nothing else outside of there.
Yep.
So everyone follows the same rules, the same expectations. And although we have non-negotiables, right? Like we are a company, okay?
Right,
So
right.
we do have like, this is the handbook and the things in the handbook are in the handbook, right? But how we teach others to learn or to access what they need to maybe move up in the organization is where we start to talk about like the equitable access piece. So not just providing the access, but how they can get what they need.
And everybody's different of what they need.
Right.
And people's goals are different. I think one of the best examples that was talked about this week in one of our meetings with the mentors, I feel it was a good example, it helped with me, was that let's say you are going to school. I mean, we've talked about this too. You put all this work into going to school. It's a big sacrifice, especially if you have families, especially if you work full time, you do all this work, right? And then you're like, I'm almost there. You graduate, you're there, you're so excited. And then you watch somebody say, oh, I'm going to promote you or do this without any of that stuff, which one, you can't fulfill a business model that way, first of all. But let's say it happens. And that's some of the requests that we've had in the past is like, I don't want to go to school. And that's not equal. Surprisingly, this is just a real obvious one so you do set the non-negotiables and what we have to have. You have to have a degree. You have to have 2,000 hours, for example, to become a senior. And so that was one thing that we had talked about. And I had posed that question to some of the mentors that we had because they're all at different places, have all different, needs and goals and things like that. And all of them are like, absolutely, that would make me bad. Like that, I put a lot of work into that, And so the understanding that even when you hire somebody, your backgrounds are different. So, and even if it's not an ABA, some people have nannied for many years with a special needs child. That's a real life experience of feeding, taking care, napping, working through, going out in the community. Those are all really important things that we value because that's real life. And, that's one thing that I can't say enough is, pay varies. It's not the same. It's not the same versus degrees versus, you have the business thing where the state tells you, you got to have this, you got to have this. And then we have our own expectations of that's great. I'm glad you're a BCBA, but you have no experience with this area at all. You've been in this model, this control. That's not, it's great. It's a great thing to have to prove our field, but that's not what we do here in this real, we're dealing with parents, we're dealing with other kids. I don't mean dealing, we're interacting, that's part of our goals is to make kids more independent and comfortable in other environments. Or what are the parents' goals? That's the other thing too. Everybody's different. Every parent's different. What they want is different. I had a parent the other day that's not a client, but it was somebody out in the community, and they said, "Oh, I would really love to help you with this and your playground because we're raising money for a playground." And I had said to her, she's like, "Oh, my son is graduating." I said, "Oh, that's awesome." I'm like, "What? We're just having conversation," and she's like, "Yeah, but I don't really know what to do with him. He's 18 and he still doesn't go to the bathroom on his own." And I said, "Oh, well, there's services and things you can do for that to work on those things." She goes, "No, I'll just change him for the rest of his life." We didn't get into a big conversation, but to me, I was like, what happens what happens to him when you're not around? Or what about him? Does he want to, you know what I mean? All those different things. But that was something that parent, that would be a big goal of mine, is I'd want my kid to be able to go to the bathroom. Again, not putting anybody down, but you can see what her big thing was, you know, a totally different route that was completely not something that I would have chosen. And that's okay.
And that's okay, right? Like if I would have responded and said, no, like you need to, like,
this is what you need to do.
You need to toilet train or whatever, then I'm putting my own biases into that treatment or that like direction that I'm providing to that individual. When like, that's okay. If that wasn't, it was maybe a pick your battle type of thing. Like I'll change for a while because all these other things are going on over here and I don't know what's going on, but that parent does.
Exactly.
I mean, I think about like equitable access in so many different ways. And the more we talk about it, it's like more examples kind of come to mind. Like thinking about, okay, I'm about to take a test. Okay. So this person and me are taking the same exact test. How we study for that test is going to be different. Now, all the materials are there, right? Like we can go online and we can get the same materials. Think about like taking your boards, right? You can go online, you can get the same handbook and the same study guide and the same mock quizzes, right? And these things might help me over here and these other things might help them, but we are taking the same test. So we have access to the same study materials. We're taking the same test, but we're going to learn in different ways and have different resources that we utilize more than others because we're different people.
Right. Yep. For sure. I mean, it is. It really makes you get into a whole bunch of like, oh, this or oh, that. And so, you know, with whatever, I think the great example was when you guys worked with in a pod. So we also have team meetings every day. That's also a really cool thing, that when you're all in one area, that we have these 15-minute meetings every single day. We call them pods, they're team meetings. And one of the things that they did during those team meetings was work on things like this with different kids, or it was each other, but with different needs and different right. So that was pretty cool because that really hit home for a lot of people. They really got that, like, oh
yeah, because we do this every day with our clients, and some of us like don't always realize like what we're doing in the moment. And so we kind of like pulled that apart a little bit and showed everyone like this is what it looks like. So a staff member came up and was a client who was hard of hearing, and another staff member came up and was hard of seeing, right? And then another had some like fine motor areas that needed developing. Okay, so there was like 3 different staff that had these things that they were working on. And then we had more staff come up and be their therapists and try to teach them the same skill. They were all trying to draw a smiley face. Okay, but then they each had different prompting levels that they had to provide that client. And then each client had a certain prompt that was going to work better for them. Right. So if I am drawing a smiley face, but I don't have the fine motor to do that, a hand over hand prompt might have been easier because I have someone kind of guiding and helping with that fine motor piece. Whereas if someone just said, here, do this, and modeled how to draw a smiley face, I would have had a harder time doing that. So those are situations that we kind of showed.
I think it's great because we do the same thing with staff every day. And that's kind of the point, was that's what's different when we hire somebody in different areas, different, you know, I mean, there's just so many examples of like, you know, you're going to Mount Pleasant, you're going to go to school, you're going to go here, you're going to go with adults, you're going to go with the younger kids, you're going to go school ready. These are the hours you can work. We've had staff come in and say, you know, this is going on in my life. Can I take 2 weeks to adjust my schedule? Of course, you know, I mean, these are requirements, but this is what we can do to meet the need temporarily, you know, moving forward, blah, blah, blah. So we'd rather have more of, you know, everybody has a situation. Everybody has had a situation at some point. And so we want to meet those needs within what we can do,
Mm-hmm.
while still meeting the needs of the clients too. But that can look different.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think we say all the time now in the last couple of weeks that we really is, you want to achieve what each person can achieve or wants to achieve, right? I want to achieve this. So what does that look like for me? Nicole wants to achieve that. So how does she achieve that? And that may look and will look very different many times. So I think this is something that I feel like I constantly have to keep thinking about, and how do we break this down? How do we, some things we're like, this is what it needs to be. Online school is another one versus in person.
Yeah.
Part-time versus full-time versus, different costs of school. That was one thing that one of our mentors too helped us to find a school that's online that you go at your kind of own pace. So pay is something that's not as big of an issue, and the overall cost of the school is more affordable. I think it was like 44% for undergrad, and I forget what the other one was. It's a lot less. So that's pretty cool. I just actually passed that on today to somebody else because they said that they were struggling with it, and they're like, "You got to be kidding me, really?" I'm like, "Yeah, you totally can do it." So that was fun because we have a resource. And so yeah. What else? Do we have anything else that we want to talk about with that? I'm trying to think with Equitable Access. I think those are the big things, right? So yeah, I hope that this was super helpful. It's something that I think that we've really had to come to be okay with, that we're constantly learning. So we may look back at this video and be like, man, we really didn't know that much right there, because you're constantly learning. I've learned so much in the last couple of weeks even, and talking to other people and them asking questions or just making comments and just really brainstorming and opening it up. So that's the thing I think in the last 3 years that has really changed us and elevated us to just be a little bit different, or a lot different, is that just, again, it's not everything is the same. Not everything is like this or that. There's so much variable within what your policy and what your end game is, but how you get there, or how everybody's end game can vary a little bit too based off of what they want. So I think that that's really changed as in the way you think about things in the last couple of years. So I'm excited to see what continues and what we kind of find and open up and hear. But even some of the things that we've been talking about the last couple of months, it's really cool to hear the staff thinking about it and thinking, okay, how does this affect me? How do I make this so I'm hitting what I need to be hitting? We've heard a lot about hours and attendance and things like that. And that's really important to us too, because you're not here, or we got to make sure that we're still covering those things and working towards that. So that's not an issue. You're not here, that's a problem, right? So what do we do so everybody gets what they need, but we also get the kids what they need? So that's, I think, the biggest thing that we're working on right now. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've got. Are you good?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Talk to you later. Bye. I held my breath when I did that.